Imagine you're sitting on this pristine white sand beach, right? Just staring out at that perfect turquoise water. You probably have a frozen drink in your hand. Maybe it's got one of those little paper umbrellas and
Yeah, the classic vacation setup.
exactly the whole postcard vibe. And floating through the air is this breezy, gentle, tropical rhythm. I mean, for most of the world, that sound is just categorized as, vacation music. It's this carefree, exotic escape.
Right, it's background noise for relaxing.
Right. But what if I told you that the music you are relaxing to was actually forged as this highly sophisticated weapon of political resistance? Like, what if that relaxing acoustic guitar was originally designed to bypass colonial censors?
Which is wild to think about.
It is, and that cheerful rhythm, what if it was engineered specifically to unite tens of thousands of oppressed people into this single marching physical body?
The contrast there is just, I mean, the contrast between how this music is marketed globally today and how it actually functions locally, it is staggering. It's the absolute definition of a cultural pressure cooker.
Welcome to the deep dive. And a very special welcome to you, the learner. We are really thrilled you're here with us today because our mission today is to take this stack of fascinating research, specifically a cultural theory column from MMR on Caribbean soca and Calypso, and we are going to completely rewire how you hear this soundtrack.
Yeah, we're really going to tear it down to the studs.
Totally. So the source material argues that we shouldn't view the Caribbean as just this picturesque geographic location. We actually have to view it as a, quote, compressed historical space.
Right, and that phrase, compressed historical space, it's doing a lot of heavy lifting in the text. When we talk about that, we're really talking about centuries of human trauma and triumph, just colliding on these tiny islands in
Right.
real time.
Hmm.
You have European colonialism imposing its structures. You have the brutal forced migration of African people. There's the tragic severance of indigenous cultures. And then right after emancipation, you have this massive, unprecedented mixing of all these societies trying to figure out how to just coexist.
Yeah, and in an environment like that, I mean, a song cannot just be background entertainment. The column points out that for populations who were systematically stripped of their native languages and, denied any formal political voice, music had to shoulder this immense burden.
It really did. It wasn't just art.
Right. It functioned as a memory vault.
Yeah.
It operated as a medium for razor-sharp social critique. And crucially, it was the primary tool they used to rebuild a shattered sense of community.
Exactly. So today, we're going to trace this evolutionary line from Calypso straight through to Soca. And the core insight the research presents is that this evolution, it is not just a story about shifting musical tastes.
Right. It's not like people just woke up and decided they liked synthesizers more than acoustic guitars.
No, not at all. We're looking at a continuous cultural lifeline here. It's a survival mechanism that is constantly, basically adapting its sonic structure to overcome the constraints of whatever era it finds itself in.
So let's go back to the origins of this specific sound, right? We're in 18th and 19th century Trinidad. The island is under French colonial influence, and you have this incredible collision taking place.
Yeah, massive cultural collision.
You've got the European carnival traditions, the
Yeah.
masquerades, the formal balls, and they are mixing with West African call and response singing, plus this very rich, deeply ingrained culture of improvised narrative poetry.
And out of that very specific alchemy, Calypso was born.
Mm-hmm.
But the defining feature of early Calypso isn't actually just the rhythm, it is the language. The singers were primarily using French Creole.
Yeah, I saw that in the reading, but I'm a little stuck on the why there. Like, why sing in a localized Creole instead of standard French, or even the languages they brought over from Africa?
Well, it functioned as an encrypted frequency.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the people singing these songs, they were offering these blistering, biting social critiques of the ruling colonial class. Now, if they sang those insults in standard French, I mean, they would be immediately identified and punished by the authorities.
Right, you can't just openly mock the guy with the whip.
Exactly. But by using French Creole, they were utilizing a dialect that the elite generally ignored or just couldn't fully parse. So they could literally stand in public, openly mock the plantation owners and the governors, and the targets of the joke would just, nod along to the beat, completely oblivious.
Oh, wow. So the colonial elite are just out there tapping their feet to their own roasting. That is brilliant.
It's incredible subversive brilliance.
But then, as we move into the late 19th century, the British take control of Trinidad, the island urbanizes, the music starts to adopt English, and it moves from the rural agricultural areas into these dense city centers. And this is where the role of the calypsonian completely transforms.
Yeah, the whole function of the singer changes.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because before we had widely accessible daily newspapers or, radio broadcasts, calypsonians were essentially the investigative journalists and the Twitter feeds of their day, right?
Oh, the comparison to a modern social media feed is incredibly accurate. Calypsonians essentially became the news anchors of the streets.
Like a walking news timeline.
Basically, yeah. Their job was to report on everything happening in the city. So political scandals, local crimes, neighborhood gossip, who was cheating on who. They were delivering the daily news, but doing it in rhyming verse.
And what's wild is the melody wasn't even the primary focus. The source material highlights that wit, sarcasm, and these incredibly layered, clever double entendre. That was the true measure of a singer's skill.
Because words were literally the only weapon they had against a heavily stratified society.
Right. The sharper the lyrics, the more respect you commanded.
Exactly. And as Calypso urbanized, it moved into these specialized performance venues called tents. The culture became fiercely competitive. I mean, singers would battle each other lyrically to become stars, generating entirely new songs every single year that reacted to current events.
Yeah, the MMR column actually refers to this as a living annual archive of society. Calypso was the daily newspaper, the courtroom cross-examination, and the street corner rumor mill all rolled into one musical form.
It was everything.
That paints such a vivid picture of the intellectual side of the music, but to really fully grasp Calypso, we have to talk about the physical side. We have to talk about Carnival.
We do. The research is adamant that you cannot separate Calypso from the Trinidadian Carnival.
Right, they're completely intertwined.
Yeah, Carnival is this cultural apparatus that actively refuses to let you consume the music in isolation.
Because post-slavery, Carnival wasn't just a party. It was this massive explosion of repressed physical expression. I mean, think about the historical context for a second. For generations, people were legally barred from gathering in large groups.
Yes.
They were barred from making loud noises and barred from freely celebrating their own bodies. So Carnival became the one designated space where all of that tension could finally just be public, loud, and totally unrestrained.
And Calypso served as the engine of that massive release. The songs were conceptualized and written specifically during the preparation months for Carnival, and then executed during the festival itself. And here is where the dynamic fundamentally differs from, say, a Western concert model.
Oh, okay. How so?
Well, the audience at Carnival, they were not passive consumers.
Right. They weren't just buying a ticket and standing around watching a stage.
No, the audience completed the music. It was through call and response choruses, synchronized shouts, and the sheer physical act of marching and dancing down the avenue.
Oh, wow.
The music wasn't just playing alongside the festival. The music was the infrastructure of the festival. The entire city space transformed into the stage.
Which, I mean, that brings up a massive logistical problem. If you need to project music across a city filled with thousands of marching, shouting people, traditional acoustic guitars, or like wooden percussion instruments, they're just going to get swallowed up by the noise.
Oh, completely drowned out.
Right. Which leads to this incredible technological innovation in the early 20th century, the invention of the steel pan. The source mentions they used discarded oil drums. Why did a heavy metal industrial barrel become the defining instrument of this era?
Well, what's fascinating here is the sheer physics of acoustics. You're dealing with massive, incredibly noisy outdoor street marches. Wood and string instruments simply lack the acoustic power to cut through a wall of human voices and ambient city noise.
They just don't have the volume.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when you take a steel barrel, you hammer it out and you tune it into a pan, it produces this incredibly clear, sharp, metallic resonance.
It just pierces right through the atmosphere.
Right. It essentially acts as an acoustic megaphone.
Mm-hmm.
The steel pan fundamentally expanded Calypso's rhythm and melody because really for the first time you had a melodic instrument that was loud enough to physically lead thousands of people down a street without any electrical amplification.
So we have this powerful, localized, acoustically ingenious musical culture. But in the early 20th century, technology shifts again. We get the rise of the recording industry and international radio, so Calypso starts to cross borders.
It does. It gets exported, primarily to the United States and the United Kingdom. And as with any localized art form that enters a global market, it encounters a double-edged sword.
The trade-off is brutal, honestly. First, you have the physical limits of early vinyl records, meaning these sprawling, endless narrative songs, they had to be chopped down to like 3 minutes.
Yeah, heavily edited.
And second, to appeal to international tastes and to pass international censors, the music had to be sanitized. The really sharp political critiques, the complex local slang, the obscenities, they were all just stripped away.
Because the international market was looking to buy that exotic, carefree, tropical escape we discussed at the top of the show, they had zero interest in the complex political anger or the hyperlocal news of Trinidad, so the industry packaged the music to be generic and palatable.
It totally reminds me of a band having a safe, heavily edited radio version of a song for the mainstream charts, but holding on to the raw, unedited, politically charged version for their underground live shows.
That's a perfect analogy. The research highlights that a profound dual structure formed. The radical, direct expression of Calypso didn't vanish at all. It just stayed fiercely domestic.
Interesting.
Yeah, so you ended up with the export version printed on foreign records and the domestic version performed live at the local carnival. The island essentially developed a psychological split between what the rest of the world heard them playing and what they were actually feeling.
And that simmering tension perfectly sets the stage for a massive musical earthquake in the 1970s. Trinidad is changing rapidly. You have a massive younger demographic coming of age. You have the influx of American funk and disco dominating the radio.
A huge influence, yeah.
And you have electric studio technology synthesizers, drum machines becoming widely accessible. Traditional calypso, with its dense paragraphs of lyrics and its mid-tempo kind of walking pace rhythm, suddenly feels a bit out of step with the youth.
The cultural environment shifted violently,
Yeah.
requiring the music to adapt once again. The youth needed a sound that reflected a faster, more electrified world. And so, soca emerges.
Now, the column points out that soca is a portmanteau. It's a blending of the words soul and calypso. But how exactly does it change the sound?
Well, soca keeps the underlying DNA of calypso, but it drastically rearranges the priorities. It basically takes the rhythm and shoves it to the absolute forefront. To explain the mechanics a bit, it establishes a driving four-beat foundation.
Okay, like a heartbeat.
Exactly. If you picture a heartbeat, it's that constant, relentless thump, 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 thump that anchors the song. Then it heavily layers the percussion, thickens the bass lines so you literally feel them in your chest, and utilizes bright digital synthesizers and brass sections.
Because synths and brass cut through the noise of an outdoor crowd even better than a steel pan.
Exactly. The entire sonic architecture of soca is engineered for instant, massive crowd activation. It uses a syncopated drive, which essentially means it places the musical emphasis on the unexpected offbeats. That syncopation tricks the brain and forces your hips and shoulders to move to catch the rhythm.
Wait, I'm stuck on something here. If soca pushes the rhythm so far forward, the lyrics naturally have to take a back seat, right?
They do, yeah.
Yeah, the MMR column notes that soca lyrics became drastically shorter, much simpler, often just relying on basic repetition and chanting instructions to the crowd. If you're stripping away the brilliant investigative journalism and the poetry of calypso just to make people jump around, isn't that just dumbing down the culture? Didn't the music kind of lose its soul?
That is the most common critique leveled at soca, but the source text vehemently argues against that perspective. This raises a really important question about how we fundamentally value music. This shift wasn't a dumbing down or a loss of soul. It was a strategic reorganization. It was a division of labor.
A division of labor. How does that actually work in practice?
Well, calypso didn't disappear when soca arrived. It simply maintained its specific job. Calypso kept the role of social critique, complex storytelling, and lyrical competition inside the performance tents.
Ah, okay.
And soca, on the other hand, was assigned the role of pure social cohesion. That heavy bass and syncopated rhythm is designed for a very specific, vital purpose: to take a chaotic street of 10,000 individual people and force them to move, breathe, and step as a single, unified physical organism.
Oh, wow. So Calypso does the work of uniting people's minds through shared information and critique, while Soca does the work of uniting people's bodies through shared physical movement.
Exactly. Calypso is the critique, soca is the celebration. They are two vital halves of the exact same cultural requirement. You need both to survive.
That reframes everything for me. And as this music spread out from Trinidad across the Caribbean, it adapted to new environments in some truly fascinating ways. Let's look at the region first. In Barbados, for example, the music evolved to feature much clearer, more straightforward melodies.
Which makes perfect sense when you look at the economic constraints. Barbados has a massive tourism industry. A highly complex, deeply syncopated melody can be really hard for an uninitiated tourist's ear to follow.
Right, they need something catchier.
Yeah, by straightening out the melody, they made it commercially accessible to outsiders, while fiercely preserving their local Bajan dialects in the lyrics to maintain their own inside cultural identity.
And in Saint Lucia, the French Creole influence remained deeply rooted. The column notes their version of Calypso focused much less on the fierce, aggressive lyrical competition you saw in Trinidad, and much more on narrative storytelling. It became this mechanism for preserving communal memory in a changing world. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Always the best part.
Right. By the late 20th century, we see massive waves of Caribbean immigrants moving to major global cities like London, New York, Toronto. And they don't just bring their suitcases, they bring Carnival and the music with them.
Because when you are separated from your geographic home, you have to find a way to recreate it.
Exactly. For these immigrants, the music literally became architectural material. They used the bass lines and the rhythms to build a piece of the Caribbean right in the middle of a cold foreign city.
And as they built those sonic homes, they naturally cross-pollinated with the sounds of their new environments. The text details how the Caribbean diaspora in London was living side by side with massive Jamaican communities. So London soca started absorbing the incredibly heavy, deep bass lines of Jamaican reggae and dub.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, it shifted the feeling from a light, airy street parade to a heavy, grounded experience where the bass actually vibrates your ribs.
Meanwhile, in Toronto, you have a very different multicultural collision. The soca produced there started injecting harder, much more aggressive hip-hop style beats. The fluid Caribbean rhythm gets this sharper edge, like a drum machine slicing the beat into stricter grids. The music is actively absorbing its surroundings.
And as it absorbs these global influences, it fractures into highly specialized subgenres. By the 1980s, the research notes a distinct structural split in soca itself, driven entirely by the physical demands of the audience.
Right, you get boogie soca, which is this smooth, mid-tempo, heavily disco-influenced groove. It's highly repetitive, focused entirely on pleasure, and engineered specifically for the indoor club dance floor where you might, dance for hours.
Which stands in stark contrast to power soca. Power soca is fast. It is relentless. It relies on incredibly dense, heavy percussion designed to create short, intense bursts of pure euphoria.
So it's basically adrenaline.
Exactly. Its entire architectural purpose is to fuel the chaotic outdoor carnival march.
You literally have different tempos and structures of music engineered for different types of human physical stamina, which basically brings us right to the edge of the 21st century. The digital age arrives, and digital production completely rewrites the rulebook. Producers no longer need a massive recording studio or a full brass band. They can generate tracks cheaply and incredibly fast using just a laptop.
And this creates an absolute explosion of volume. Thousands of new tracks are generated every single year, specifically for the few weeks of carnival season. But the unavoidable side effect of that hyperproduction is that the lifespan of these songs plummets.
They just come and go.
Yeah, they burn incredibly bright for the duration of the festival, and then they're almost immediately replaced the following year.
And it is no longer just an audio experience either. With the rise of social networking sites and short-form video platforms, the visual choreography has become totally inseparable from the music itself. A song's success today depends heavily on how well the specific dance moves translate visually across a smartphone screen.
The digital technology has amplified the immediate viral impact of the music, fundamentally accelerating the speed of the festival culture. But what the source text makes clear is that even as the format shrinks to fit a vertical screen, that core ancient function activating the physical body and connecting the community, it remains exactly the same.
It is an unbelievable journey to track. I mean, we started with the suppressed whispers of enslaved people encrypting their mockery of the elite in French Creole. We moved to the journalistic rhyming news feeds of the Calypsonians battling in the city tents.
The living archives.
Right, we saw the literal invention of the steel pan, hammering out oil drums just to cut through the noise of freedom on the streets. And now we are looking at the bass-heavy euphoria of modern soca, engineered to make millions of people move in unison, spreading globally through viral dance videos.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the central thesis of the MMR column is really undeniable. Calypso and Soca are not separate, static genres that you can neatly file away on a shelf. They represent a living, breathing cultural continuum.
Hmm.
They're constantly navigating this profound tension between the words and the body, between sharp political critique and pure physical celebration. But whether the tool is an acoustic guitar, an oil drum, or a digital synthesizer, the music always serves the exact same fundamental imperative to rebuild, sustain, and unite the community.
So what does this all mean for you? Well, think about this for a second. Caribbean music evolved its highly specific sound to overcome the literal constraints of its environment. Singing in French Creole bypassed colonial censors. The metallic ring of the steel pan solved the acoustic problem of an outdoor street festival. Heavy, syncopated bass was the solution to physically moving massive crowds. Every sound you hear was a brilliant solution to a constraint.
Which is such a powerful lens to view art through.
Absolutely. So the question to ask yourself as you look at the world today is, how are the hidden constraints of our modern digital platforms, like the algorithmic feed, the 15-second video limit, the tiny smartphone speaker, silently shaping the very structure of the music being created right now? What invisible forces are molding the soundtrack of our era?
A fascinating question to leave on, and one that honestly completely changes how you listen to the radio.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. The next time you hear a Caribbean rhythm, whether you're on a beach or just scrolling through a social media feed, we really hope you hear the centuries of history and survival echoing behind the beat. Until next time, keep listening closely to the world around you.